So I'm planting my main crop, kalettes, today, a wonderful crop, a cross between Brussels sprouts and kale. And I'm going to plant them in one of my long beds. I'm going to take you through step by step the process. My seedlings are looking really nice now. This is the perfect size, I think, to plant them out, but people have success planting them smaller and bigger, so don't just go on my experience, try it out for yourself. So let's take a look round. So this is the bed I'm planting into. Last year this was onions until August, then it was spinach, lettuce, spring onions and leeks, which I transplanted from another bed, and I've just finished clearing all of those. I've prepared it with Marshall's Organic Extra, so that's a kind of cow manure, composted cow manure that's been composted with seaweed, so it's quite a nice nutritious mix. And to that I have added just a little bit of hoof and horn, just to boost the nitrogen content just a little bit, because kalettes are huge plants. They take a lot of nutrition out of the soil, and this is very sandy soil, so it doesn't really have that much goodness in it. But the top few 6 inches or so have got quite a lot of organic matter in them from years and years of applications of surface mulch of compost. I'm not adding any compost to the surface this year just because I don't have any that's ready, so we're just going to rely on those nutrients. So I'm using a corer to make the holes. I like a corer because it minimises the soil disruption, and I'm all about minimising soil disruption. Also about keeping living roots in the soil for as long as possible. So this bed pretty much had living roots in the soil up until last week, so it's only been without them for a week and so yeah, not very long. And also I leave the roots of the plants in the soil, so there's lettuce roots and spinach roots and spring onion roots in the soil. The leeks, of course, I removed. I am putting a little bit of Marshall's Organic Extra into the holes, and I am going to pre-water the holes. In the past I pre-watered the holes with fish emulsion and seaweed emulsion and things like that. I found it really had no effect, so I'm not bothering with that anymore. That's just one more expense eliminated. So while the water's soaking into those holes, I've just built the frame that will support the nets. I'll show you the details of that in a minute. So let's just look at these plants in a bit more detail. So the first thing we'll note is when we sowed them. So we sowed them on the 12th of March. So I sow mine quite late because I like to plant them out quite young. Small modules, I prick them out into these when they're about 2 weeks old, something like that. And because they've only been in these modules for about 4 weeks, they don't need a big module. In fact, you could probably get away with a smaller one, but you can see how much root development there is on these. And so when I'm planting them, I want to plant them a little bit deep, but not too deep, because they don't have a particularly leggy stem on them or anything. And so that is fine. I just push them in like that. So they're just a couple of inches below the surface. And I'll backfill that a little bit with nice compost that's enriched with some nutrients. Again, not too much. They don't need too much because there's plenty in the ground and in the holes. But I want to make a little depression here, just so that it's going to collect the water, and the water's not going to run away from the plants. So you'll hear a lot about people saying you've got to really firm them in and heel them in and all that sort of thing. In sandy soil, really, it's not going to make much difference. I just firm them in with my hand like that. That is just fine. You'll notice I've got these fence pins, which are going to be used to support the net, which I'll talk about in a minute. But what I do is when I take the nets off, which I do in about July time, I just use these same pins to support the plants. And these are pretty good. You know, they last a long time, these fence pins. They're multi-purpose, you can use them for anything. Last obviously a lot longer than canes, and these are actually pretty adequate as a way of supporting even a giant plant like a kalette. I never have them fall over. and I generally don't have the fence pins pushed in quite as deep as that, probably more like the depth of that one, and that is just sufficient to support them even through the worst of the gales. So the next thing to do is inspect the underside of leaves for any problems, and in this case there's nothing to be seen. No caterpillars, no eggs, no fungal growth or anything like that. And you might have noticed the colouring on the leaves. That isn't because there's some nutritional deficiency or anything like that. Kales, kalettes have this beautiful purpley colouring. So there we go, they're all planted up. Obviously it looks like a lot of space at the moment, but actually they soon fill that space. And interplanting is an interesting challenge here because they do grow so fast. So obviously you could put radish, for example, in this bed or something like that, something fast growing like turnips and things. What I like to do is I like to put leeks down the outside, and I have tried putting leeks down the inside, but they don't get enough light. So this is the south side, so I'll put leeks down here and they'll live their life down this edge. They will get a bit bashed up, but even though they look in quite terrible condition by the time they get to sort of September, October time, you'd be amazed that once you start taking the leaves off the stems of the kalettes, then they get loads of light and they prick up, and you get loads and loads of great baby leeks in spring, well actually in sort of late winter and all through spring. So it's a great interplant, I think, because I never have enough space for leeks. On this side, this is where I'm basically planting them, and I will remove them at some point and plant them in another bed, but it's just kind of like a storage location because this is the north side, doesn't get enough sun. So that's what I'm going to do with the leeks. Down the centre I'm going to put lettuces that will heart up within 6 weeks or so, and that is just about the time when it's going to get a bit difficult to access them and the light levels will reduce and all of that. So hopefully we'll get a lettuce crop out of here. I just happen to have spare lettuces, so it's quite nice to have a few spares. So these leeks are called Pulbella. They don't have a particularly well developed root system. I plant them in a kind of strange way, I suppose. So I've multi-sown them. So there's 4 leeks in here. I just made a fairly big dibbed hole, and then I drop them in like that, and then I just push them right down to the bottom, like that. Almost as if I'm sort of doing a press stud or something. So just at the front like that, and then I just get them at the tip there and just push them all the way down. And so the roots go right down to the bottom of the hole. So they're planted quite deep. They've got a nice depression around them to capture the water, and they just grow happily like that. You don't get massive leeks. What you get is loads and loads, in this case about 100, kind of baby leeks, about 1 centimetre in width or something like that. And we much prefer them. We like to get a lot of small leeks rather than a few large leeks. You're never going to win any competitions growing leeks like this, but they win the taste test. So there we go, all finished. Really happy with these, very happy with the quality of these plants. And they won't need supporting now until I take the nets off, and that is partly because I don't have enough fence pins to support them until I take the nets off, but also just partly because the nets act as a reasonable windbreak. Now you can see I've lowered the level of these pins down. I will pull them up again when I put the butterfly netting on in about a month or so's time, and by that time these plants will be about this high, so they'll be up to the fence pins. The net I'm going to use initially is Envirotect. That provides more wind protection than butterfly netting, and it also keeps them a bit warmer, and it will keep off butterflies obviously, but probably will keep off cabbage root fly. However, I am going to water these beds with the fruit and veg protection nematode, which is the nematode that I use for the alliums the carrots, the parsnips and the brassicas. For brassicas it kills cabbage root fly, also for lettuces. For lettuces it kills cutworm, and cutworm can also affect the brassicas. For alliums it kills the onion fly, and for carrots and parsnips it kills carrot fly. So it's a pretty useful mix of nematodes, and I think it covers 40 square metres, which is about the amount of space I've got allocated for those veggies. So this is my favoured design for framing for nets, and basically it's just old canes just looped into the fence pin and just secured with a tiny cable tie. And these are pretty important so you don't rip your net. These are eye savers, and yeah, it's really rigid once it's all attached together, surprisingly so, and it's very easy and to assemble. It takes about 5 minutes, and it's even quicker to disassemble. So when I put the butterfly netting on, as I say, in a few weeks' time, I'll just pull the fence pins out a bit so that they're a little bit higher up. But right now I want the net fairly close to the ground to provide the maximum wind protection and warmth. So this is what I mean by Envirotect, and you can see it's quite loose weave but still fairly tight. Certainly no butterflies are going to get through there, and the nice thing about it is you can see through it, and the water just goes obviously straight through it. In most cases where I'm using it, I like to just clip it onto the beds, and it's kind of nice and neat. I do occasionally still use fleece, but I'm trying to get away from it because it doesn't last very long, and there's all the microplastics that it's dropping into the ground. So as I replace it, I'm always just replacing it with this, even though it's not quite as warm. I'd rather have my plants a little bit cooler and growing a little bit slower and avoid the microplastics. Same thing on the carrot beds. Makes a nice neat job. This is actually layered double thick. So if you want more information on growing kalettes or any of the other things that I grow, I have individual growing guides for pretty much everything. In fact, everything that's shown in green, there's a growing guide for. Anything that's still white, there isn't a growing guide for yet, and that'll be something I'll sort out over winter. So let's just take a look at the one for kalettes. And here's the contents list. So I do go into why to grow kalettes, and they're an absolutely wonderful crop. When to sow them, how to prick them out, where to plant them, preparing the ground, etc, etc. I'll let you read it for yourself. There's a kind of quick introduction, and then there's loads more videos that show you all about kalettes at different stages of growth, from planting to harvesting, even how to remove the plants, and where to plant them and all that sort of thing. So loads of information there. And so if you're interested in any of the things that I grow, I do recommend you check out these individual growing guides. And that is just a small part of the book that I've written, and that takes you through pretty much everything you need to know about the basics of gardening. There's a whole section on the basics: planting, sowing, growing with lights, hardening off, bed prep and all of that sort of thing. But also loads of more advanced topics like 8 steps to self-sufficiency, for example, all the advanced growing techniques that I use, all the sort of successional sowings, interplanting, relay planting, progressive thinning and all of those sorts of things, with loads of examples and more videos. So my name's Steve, this is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.